Welcome to today's webinar, Jimmy. We are going to give other participants another minute or two to trickle in here before we get things kicked off, but welcome to today's webinar.
Okay, turning on the conference call.
Welcome, Muriel, to today's webinar. I guess we'll go ahead and it's 2 minutes past 12 o'clock here in Virginia, so I'll go ahead and we'll get things started. So for those of you who are new to the Lunch and Learn, this is a place where you can come and ask any questions and get those answered. We do host these every Monday through Thursday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. So for those of you who are on the line, I've gone ahead and given everybody the ability to come off mute and ask any questions, should you feel comfortable doing that. Or if you look at your Zoom panel, you have a couple of options there too. If you don't feel comfortable coming off mute, you can select the chat option and go ahead and send your question in that way. Or you can select the Q&A option and you can submit questions through there as well. Now I'll give everyone a minute or two to ask any of those questions. If we don't have any questions come in, there is a topic that I would love to go over today, and that's runtime selection for our flows and our rules. But I'd love to answer any questions first. And Jimmy, I see you have your hand raised. Feel free to come off mute and ask your question.
All right. So on multiple file upload control, form control, there's a specify input. I think you might have helped me on this a long time ago. There's a specify input where if you were like going back into a form, you can feed that control files so that the person filling out the form can see those files again. Can you do that same option on just a normal file upload? Because what my use case is, I've got a person filling out a form, they're sending it on, and then it's coming back to them. I want them to be able to remove that attachment or replace it, but I don't want to have to use a download and upload or a multiple files control.
Gotcha.
But I can't find a specify inputs option or property on just the normal file upload control.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the multi-file upload is the only control that allows you to pass in existing files as well as add new files. If I were to add a like a single file upload and I tried to pass in, or I'm sorry, maybe a file download, if I tried to pass those in, it wouldn't be available. So it's only the multiple file upload. Is that what your question was?
Yeah, but is there a specific reason, or is it just a limitation? I even tried doing a workaround with a form control, an active form control, and doing a fetch and feeding it, thinking I could kind of do an automated auto upload to it, and it still wasn't showing it.
Gotcha. I'm not really sure the reason behind that. It might be a code limitation. Happy to speak to our dev team and see if that is if that's for a specific reason, or maybe it was just something that was overlooked.
Yeah, that'd be nice, because I can see many use cases for us to be able to do that and not have to build some big workaround with multiple download, upload control elements, because the files I'm using are specific. So doing a multi-file upload wouldn't really be the best option.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I'm assuming, maybe what you're doing now is maybe you have like a data repeater, and you might have like a visibility rule that says, if there's an existing file, then show the file download. If there isn't a file, show the file upload component.
Yes.
Is that
Yep.
okay?
Yeah. But the file download it's not as nice as the file upload before you submit the form. So when you upload the file, on the file upload, you've got the ability to remove the file or even download it in the element or in the form, but the file download just as a link or a URL. So
Gotcha. Well, this does sound like a great opportunity for some improvement there. So we appreciate your feedback.
cool, thanks.
Absolutely. And I'm going to check to see if we have any other questions that have popped up, and I don't see any yet. All right, so maybe for the next couple minutes, I'll just go over a topic that has come up for me recently, and I think it's a very underutilized feature that Decisions offers. And I am a rules nerd, so I love building different types of rules and decisions. So I'm going to selfishly go over this topic, while I'm waiting for questions to come in. Before I begin, this might already be something that you guys are aware of, so I don't want to bore you guys. So Jimmy and Muriel, are you aware of our runtime selection feature on rules and subflows, where you can dynamically pick what rule to run?
Only in theory. I don't know how it works.
Okay, no problem. Well, cool. We'll go over it. So I am just going to come up with a silly use case here. So forgive me for my silly use case. Maybe what we'll do is we'll build two different rules to determine if a car is eligible for trade-in. And what we'll do is we'll look at the make of the car, and based on the make, that will determine which rule should actually be fired off in our flow. So I'm going to start by creating a simple data structure here. One thing to be aware of if you're using runtime rules or runtime flows, the input to the flow or to the rule has to be the same. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a data structure that houses, all of the fields that I might need to make use of. So we'll just call this our car details. I'll just add a few fields here, maybe make, model. We'll do year and maybe mileage. And we'll go ahead, we'll make year an int and mileage decimal. All right. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to build two very simple rules. We'll just make them statement rules for now, but just know this same principle can be applied to any style of rule. But we'll go ahead, we'll build two simple rules, then we'll go into the flow designer and see how you configure that in the flow designer. So I'm going to go ahead, we'll create our first rule here, and we'll call this our, I don't know, maybe our Honda trade-in rule. Go ahead, hit create. And we'll go ahead and define that data structure that I defined. So one thing, again, to be aware of is the inputs to these rules or the inputs to these subflows have to be exactly the same. So let me go ahead and find my car details. There we go. And I'll just make something simple. So maybe if we're thinking about Hondas, maybe we want to look at the model, and if the model is in the list of, let's see, we'll say HRV, because that's what I drive, and maybe a CRV, then we're good to trade that in. But maybe for Hondas, we also want to look at the year. Maybe the year has to be newer than or greater than 2016. So I'll go ahead and pick a year. And by no means am I in the car business, so please do not take these rules to be actual trade-in rules. This is just me coming up with something off the top of my head. So again, we'll say greater than, and we'll put 2016 here. All right. So this is going to be our first rule. We're going to be looking at the model. We'll be looking at the year. But maybe we want to, if a request comes in and it's for Toyota, maybe we want to look at different details or fire off a different rule. But we still want to only place one run rule step in our flow. Just keep things nice and neat and organized. So we'll call this our Toyota trade-in rule. But maybe for Toyotas, we don't really care about the make. I'm sorry, the model. Oops, I gotta define that input. Maybe we just care about the year and the mileage. We'll go ahead and we'll call this car details. All right, so we'll say for this one, we're gonna look at the year, and the year has to be greater than 2010. And the mileage has to be less than 150,000. All right, so now we have our two different rules. So let's take a look at what it looks like to actually use that runtime selection. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to build our flow. And we'll call this our trade-in. I'm very creative with the names today. If you guys can think of any better names, please feel free to jump in here. And we're going to actually end up building another rule in just a moment, but I do want to go ahead and drag our run rule step on here and talk about how you configure the runtime selection. So I've gone ahead, I've dragged my run rule step here, and to actually get to that runtime selection, that's going to be in the advanced section category if you're in version 7. If you're in version 6, you shouldn't have to open up any of the properties panel. It will just already be, you'll see the selection type here. So we're going to change it from pick to runtime selection. So if you have pick, that's your standard default. You pick a rule, it's going to run every single time that same rule. Now with runtime selection, you'll notice when I select that under inputs, there's a new input here, and this is target ID. So eventually what we're going to do is we're going to map in the ID of the rule that we actually want to fire off. Now I also need to pick a target. So what this target is if there's no ID passed in, this is going to be the default rule that runs. So I'm going to go ahead, we'll just pick one of our rules here. And I apologize for my dog barking. He's very excited for today's lunch and learn. He's just saying hey to everyone. All right, so now that I've actually selected that target, one thing you need to know is whatever rule you select as that target, that's going to determine what those inputs are going to require. So now any ID that I pass in, the same details or the same inputs are going to be required for those rules as well. But here we'll go ahead and we'll say our car details are going to be coming from, the start of our flow. Maybe someone's calling this headlessly. So I'll go ahead and just define car details as our input. And for those of you who have never used the add input feature, I'll go ahead and point this out. This is another one of my favorite things in decisions. What you do is you give the data a name. So here I'm saying car details. And then when I hit add, a couple of things are going to happen. So one, decisions is automatically going to pick up that data type or that data structure that's associated with that input type. And if I go and look at my start step, it's automatically added that input name and the actual data structure. So it's just a quick way to save yourself from having to go into that input editor on your start step and add these details. You can simply do select from flow, and then when you hit add input, just give it a name and it'll automatically do it for you. And it'll automatically map it for you as well. All right, so now that we have that set up, the next thing we need to do is we need to tell this rule, okay, well, what rule, or we need to tell the step, what rule is actually going to fire off. And there are a multitude of different ways that you can do this. You can either pass the target ID in with the call. You can do a database lookup to say, hey, based on this parameter, go fetch from the database the target ID. What I'm going to do, because as I said before, I'm a rule nerd, is I'm actually going to build a truth table that's going to spit out that target ID that we want to run. So what I'll do here, we'll create our truth table. We'll call this our determine rule ID. And I'm just going to make this very simple. We're going to look at the make of the car that's passed in and determine the rule ID, or the rule ID from there. I'm going to say make equals Honda and make equals Toyota. And then the output here is just going to be that rule ID. And we'll make this a string. So the easiest way to do this is I'm just going to duplicate my tab. And I'm going to go look at my rule IDs. So we'll get our Honda. We'll just right click. We'll go to manage, and that's where you can get your rule ID. Go ahead and copy that. We'll go back in here. We'll add that rule ID. We'll get our Toyota rule ID. There we go. And we could put a default rule ID if we wanted, if these don't match anything. We'll just turn that off for today. And then finally, what I'm going to do is have to change a couple of settings here. So one, we want to return only the first result. We're going to map in our make from our input details on our start step. And then now the output of this, we can map directly into our runtime selection rule. So I'll go into target ID. We know result is what's coming from our truth table. And there we go. So now we can go ahead and debug it, and we can see this in action. Go ahead and hit debug here. I will provide some details. We'll do this one as a Honda. Maybe the mileage is 100,000, even though that might not be used in the rule, depending on what rules fired off. Call this our HRV, and the year will be a 2017. So now when I debug, we can see in our first rule, we've determined that because it's a Honda, we want to fire off this particular rule. And then if I look further in the table, we can see the Honda trade-in rule is actually the one that fired off. So we're looking at that car model, and we're looking at the car year. But if I go in here and I actually run this as a Toyota, we can see that this time, even though it's the same step, or it's one single step, now this time the Toyota rule was fired off. So again, this is a really great way if you have a parameter or something that's going to determine the actual rule or the subflow that should run. It's a nice way to have your flow completely or really organized. So here I have a potential of hundreds of different rules running, but I have it as a single step in my flow. I don't have to have like a string match step and then route it to the specific rule that I want to run. It's a very clean, organized way to look at your logic. Now, what I've done is I've just done it on this specific or on a rule, but just know you can do this on any style of rule. And if I drag this subflow step here, you can do the same thing for flows. You can go to that advanced option. You can pick that runtime selection, and you can actually fire off different subflows depending on that target ID that you pass in. Same concept though, it must have the same inputs and outputs. Now I know I ran through that pretty fast, but I want to see Muriel, Jimmy, did that help? Is that something that, I don't know if that's something you might be able to use, but maybe it's something new that you learned.
Yeah, I learned that concept at decision days on the subflow, but I hadn't thought about it on a rule. But
Oh, awesome.
It makes sense. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
it does look like something that we could definitely use.
Awesome.
Just have to do a little more thinking about it and, go back and look at this, because right now I'm not remembering what target ID is, but that's okay. I'll figure it out when I rewatch the video.
Yeah, so target ID is just going to be the ID of the actual, so I'll kind of step back a little bit. Anytime you create an entity and when I say entity, I don't mean the data structure entity. I mean like, let me use a better phrase. Anytime you create a designer element in decisions, so a form, a flow, a rule, even a report, there is an ID that gets generated and tied to it. And you can find that ID by right-clicking on any one of those items, hover over manage, and then you'll get that ID. So it's just a unique way of identifying each one of those designer elements.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that part I get. I just don't remember what it was I was supposed to feed in there. And you are correct. Entity kind of gets used like Smurf at decisions.
It does. It does.
Everything that doesn't have another name is an entity.
An entity. Yep. Yes, I had to learn that as well.
Yeah, so I'll be able to figure it out. Like I said, I just need to go through it a couple more times and solidify it myself. And maybe I'll use, car trade-in or something to play with.
Awesome. And I'm happy to export this and send it out to you guys too, if you want to import it into your environment. Some people like looking at things that are already built. Some people like, doing it themselves. So I'm happy to provide that. If you guys are interested.
If you would, that would be wonderful.
Yeah,
I'd love that.
absolutely. Absolutely. Guess I should have thought through some more cool features to show off. Give you guys some time to maybe think through some more questions. If not, we can call it a day, and I can cover for you guys, say that you were here for the full hour. No, I'm kidding. I will do that for you though.
I got one for you. So
Yeah.
I just discovered the post back button. Is that just a glorified clear button?
Post back button. You might have me there. Let's test it out. I'm guessing you mean in the form.
Yep.
Okay. Post back button. I wonder.
I looked in documentation, and from what I understood, it looks like just a clear button.
Okay.
And then have you ever used the previous button?
I have not used the previous button, only because I use and this is because I am set in my old decisions ways. The previous button is newer, and I'm just used to adding a standard button and just using the outcome path to map it to the previous form. But we can test both of those out.
Yeah, I didn't see an output for the previous, so I wasn't sure how it worked either.
Yeah, we can try it. All right. And it looks like, yeah, there's no outcome for that. So let's give it a shot. Click that. Okay. Yeah, it looks like it clears it out and kind of reopens the form. And if I look in the debugger, what it looks like it actually did was just reinitiate the form and cleared out that data. Because if you see this step here, it looks like it was actually hit twice.
Mm-hmm.
Now I wonder if I map in some data. If I, oops, looks like that didn't. Let's see here. So if I do post back, it's going to map in anything that was there. Yep. So essentially what it's doing is it's actually just reinitiating that step. So any inputs that are already defined as inputs there, it'll go ahead and re-enter that data. Interesting. Okay. So
the previous does the same thing, but it has to go from one step back to another. So you can't use a previous on like your first form. You have to have it on a second step.
Okay.
Otherwise you'll get an error.
Don't ever tell anyone that I built a form that looks like this. I usually pride myself on the styling. All right, we'll add another form.
And straight line.
And straight lines, yes. All right, so I'm glad that you called this out. I love learning new features as well. We'll just call this form 2. We'll just leave this this blank here. Submit it. Ah, look at that. Very cool. So I wonder if I put a step in between these forms, if it just automatically goes back to the previous form, or if it goes back to the previous step. I would assume it's form, since it's a form related control. Yep. Very cool.
Yeah,
Kind
nice
of,
test. I wouldn't even think of that.
yeah. And it keeps your flow looking a lot cleaner. You don't have a bunch of lines everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, because I have just a button that I've made back with the step going way back. So I do like that a lot better.
Yeah, that's very cool. I wonder if there's a way to, well, no, I guess because you can put forms in multiple flows. I was going to say, I wonder if there's a way to pick which form to go back to, but
That would be nice.
that would be cool. Let's see. I saw some other. Let's see what this does. Looks like it's the same settings.
What about the link one? What does that do? Oh, I'm sorry, that's the one you just chose.
Oh, this is a different one. It looks like it
Okay.
just makes it look like a link rather than,
Okay.
but same setting. So I guess it just goes back to the previous one before. Huh. Very cool. Thanks for calling attention to that, Jimmy. Is there anything else that has maybe caught y'all's attention that you would love to see me fumble and try and learn how to use?
Not at the moment, unless you have some secrets to how to permanently change the oh, I'm trying to think. Okay, the exclamation point with the one, I'm losing my words today. The exclamation point with the report that goes with that.
The the validation
The overall
report.
one. Yeah.
Gotcha. The I can't even remember where it's at. Val, I believe it's in here.
System validation.
Oh, right in front of my eyes.
Yeah. I had to find it first.
So you want to go ahead?
I wanted the actual error message. And if I go in and edit the report, I can add it here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can run the report and get that. But if I save it, it doesn't actually save it. I don't know if it's not supposed to. This is in version 6, by the way. Or no, it's in 7. Sorry. It's in version 7. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, see, it doesn't save it.
I see. You know what you might be able to do. Let's see, I wonder.
I mean, in my case, I could just run it from the editor and that was fine, but it seemed weird that it would tell me it was going to save it and then not save it.
Yeah, I wonder if that might be like a built-in like security thing so that somebody doesn't. Oh, but see it look, yeah. You know, you could always like make a copy of this report or create your own report and kind of create your own page for it. Let me. I wonder. Yeah, let me. I can do a little bit digging on that and see if that is kind of like a lockdown feature or a security thing.
Okay.
And you said it is version 7?
Yes, it is. We have a project that we created in version 6, and I was moving it to my local of version 7 so that I could see, what it looks like. Did I need to make any changes? That kind of thing as a test.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to export that list because it's bigger than I thought it should be.
Mm-hmm.
So I could work through the items one by one. So
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it would definitely help to have the validation information there. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I was kind of surprised it wasn't included by default.
Yeah. Now I'm intrigued. I'm going to be playing with this until I figure out how to get it to save. All right. Yeah. Sorry I couldn't help you there, but do some digging on that.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Any fun facts you want to share? Non-decisions related? Anything?
Back to my file upload
Yes.
dev request. Do I just put a support ticket in there for that dev request?
Yes, you can do that. Absolutely.
Cool.
All right. Well, I guess we can go ahead and we can close this for today. Really great questions. Thank you for watching me run through the runtime selection. Something that I think is often overlooked. So I'm glad you two got the opportunity to check it out. I have some homework. I will be sending the export of this to both of you guys, just so you have an example of it. And then I will do a little bit of digging here and see, why, even if you change and save the report, why it doesn't actually show up on the page here.
Okay.
And then Jimmy, it
great.
sounds like you are submitting the feature request for our dev team.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with me today during your lunch. I know lunchtime is valuable, so I appreciate you guys spending it with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.